to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you hear us now?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, we have no one present in the live audience. Do we have anyone in the virtual audience who would like to make any comment? Raise your hand if you do. Larry?
Nothing.
Okay, let's go on to discussion and possible action on the meeting minutes for our regular meeting of January 22, 2024. Has everyone had a chance to read page 2 of the minutes?
Yes.
Yep. I entertain a motion to approve them as submitted.
I move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Correspondence, the only correspondence I'm aware of is correspondence that has been addressed to all the commissioners. I assume everyone has it. Chief, you've seen it, Jen, you've archived it. Okay, item 5, executive reports. Chief, the floor is yours.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. The fiscal year 25 budget process, as you know, I think is going well because we resubmitted our budget request, reducing our very own budget by $80,000. I did have an opportunity to present from the Board of Finance. I'd like to thank the Vice Chair for being there in support of the budget and adding the comments that you did. So now the first selectman has solidified, Board of Selectmen has solidified their proposal. There was no additional action on our budget other than what we submitted the last time with the $80,000 reduction. So now it is in the hands of the Board of Finance. Everyone should have received a calendar invite from me for, I want to say it was March 19th. The chairman of the Board of Finance submitted a litany of questions. And he gave me the option of appearing in person rather than corresponding or doing some sort of essay type of assignment. So I will be going in person on the 19th. I encourage all police commissioners to attend. Nothing really major in the questions, kind of a lot of low hanging fruit, or maybe some things Board of Finance members, because they don't live this every day, are unfamiliar with the workings of the PD. There was a question about how we do benefits versus the Board of Education, how they do benefits. And that type of question obviously is a question for the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Director, not for an individual department head. You know, sometimes during the budget season, people treat the budget process as if there were 3 budgets: the Board of Education, the municipal budget, and the police department budget. That is not the case, as we know. The police department is a department underneath the municipal budget, and all decisions about that obviously reflect on the municipal budget. So if people can join me on the 19th, I think that'd be great to support the budget. I think it's 6 or 6:30. Is it 6:30? When the agenda comes out, I'll make sure I circulate it.
And that's here,
so everybody
right?
has, and that will be here.
Okay.
Yep, that'll be here in the room. Any questions? Everyone received their updated book, right?
Yes.
My records say everyone has that, so, okay, cool, great. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Right in. Yeah, no problem. All right, fantastic. Don't leave one without. As far as the fiscal year 2024 operating budget goes, there's nothing that I find alarming at all. The only thing that I will bring to your attention, that I bring to your attention all the time, and is certainly delineated inside our budget book for this current fiscal year as well as next fiscal year, is that when we have patrolman vacancies, the backfilling of that vacancy happens from an extra personnel line item. So at the end of this year, because we've had vacancies, even for just a short period of the beginning of the year, we will see salary end in the black, but extra personnel end up in the red. And so that seems to be some sort of hot topic discussion. I've been presenting the budget since 2004, and we haven't deviated from that practice. So this is nothing new. But I'll certainly entertain any questions anybody has on the operating budget.
None, looks good.
Yeah. Okay. Off budget accounts, you received the report.
I did have a question.
Sure.
I was just puzzled. What's the difference between police canine and dog fund?
That's a great question. So police canine is just that, our police canine program. The dog fund has to do with animal control.
Okay.
And the dog fund is very unique. The dog fund is created by state statute. And there are several hands into that fund. As an example, for those of you who have dogs and you license your dogs, yes, because it's the law, and you get your dog tags, those tags are purchased by the town clerk out of the dog fund. And so when I first became police chief, Bob Fish,
We
who's the
charge
town-
her a lot for it.
well, when Bob Fish was here, God rest his soul, he was the town treasurer. When I first became police chief, he called me in his office and he said, congratulations. He gave me a card from him and his wife, Madge. And he goes, I have a couple things to talk to you about. And I said, well, what's that? He goes, the dog fund was broke. And back then, we used to pay people like 15 hours a week, no matter what was going on, or 20 hours a week, no matter what was going on, out of the dog fund, the animal control officer. And I changed it to a per diem position where we only pay people when they need to work. So very quickly, within a year, that fund went back into the black and has stayed there repeatedly. So that funds the animal control budget, the town clerk's licensing function, any sheltering needs that we have, like we have some dogs in our shelter now that will soon come up for adoption. But all that comes out of that one fund.
Okay, great, thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we talked about the Police Explorer program and trying to get that really off the ground and focus. Do you think 569 is enough money to do that?
Absolutely not. But $569.95 is what's in our off budget account.
Okay,
So think of these accounts, Commissioner, as a savings account. Leanne Palladino, she's watching, is going to cringe with this explanation. So this is not part of our operating budget. No tax dollars are associated with these funds.
okay,
Okay, so these are off budget funds, meaning they're not part of this
this
budget.
budget,
Yep.
got it.
So if someone makes a donation to our police canine account, it goes into there. It does not go into the general fund of the town of Old Saybrook, which is part of the operating budget. Yeah, and so we are not the only department that has off-budget accounts. There's about a 3-page list of all the agencies, including the Board of Education, that have off-budget, non-taxpayer type accounts.
Okay.
Great question.
And they are typically special purpose.
Correct, yeah. And some of them are, some people look at this and go, why do you have so many? Some are delineated like this to be more transparent, because I believe in that. And some are like our law enforcement, not our law enforcement fund, sorry. Our asset forfeiture account is established by state statute, and the dog fund, as I just explained to the chairman. Any other questions on the off-budget accounts?
Okay,
For personnel matters, I do have one thing. I need to advise the commission in accordance with our rules, regulations, policies, and procedures that I did issue a 10-day suspension to a patrolman. I actually issued that today. It was for violation of section 4 of our 21 standards of conduct, maintaining acceptable attendance and availability for work. At the end of that 10-day suspension, when that employee returns, they will be issued a last chance offer with respect to their probationary employment, and any violations of that last chance agreement while they still remain on probation will be brought to the police commission's attention with my recommendation for termination. But that is the only personnel matter I have for you.
thank you.
Nothing on professional development, and the activity report is in your packet.
And the activity report continues to show a fairly steady, predictable.
It continues to show we must remain open.
Yes.
Yes, without a doubt. And, you know, just on that note, our police officers, they really do a fantastic job day in and day out. Sometimes the police department to a community just becomes kind of part of the scenery. Jill, we appreciate your emails before big storms or major events that say, hey, just thinking of you.
Yeah.
We like that. But we know, we understand when we enter this profession that more than likely we're not really thought of unless those 3 magic numbers need to be called or you're a victim of a crime or whatever. But they're doing just a great job. We're still understaffed. We did hire those 4. I heard someone make a very silly comment that looks like there's no recruitment problem anymore because they were able to hire 4 police officers, right? So we got lucky. We found 4 people to fill our 4 vacancies. That does not negate the nationwide recruitment problem that the law enforcement profession is facing. So anyone who says so is just really not making much sense. But our cops do a good job. We're understaffed. They're showing up every day. They're working their extra hours, and I appreciate them, and I know the commission appreciates what they do.
I can attest to that. I have called for help and You were quite responsive. It was a very nice, pleasant experience.
That's good to hear. Thank you for sharing.
Are there any other questions of the chief on his executive reports? All right, let's move on to item 6, discussion concerning the PERF study and commission expectations. And I want to lead here, and I want to preface what I say by saying, Chief, this is not personal. I do think it's important to begin by addressing the 2 concerns that Chief Sparrow has raised publicly about the PERF study. Specifically, that the commission doesn't know exactly what the scope of the study is, and that the process by which the study came about was flawed because only the first selectman had any direct communication with PERF. I'd like to speak to process first. This study came about because the first selectman is responsible by statute for all collective bargaining and resultant collective bargaining agreements entered into by the town. Last summer, Chief Sparrow identified, entirely appropriately, a serious recruiting and retention problem then faced by the department, and he proposed a series of steps that could be taken in collective bargaining to address that problem. Those steps could readily be predicted to cost the town well into 6 figures, if not 7 figures, over the multi-year life of that next collective bargaining agreement, and certainly over its successor agreements. In my view, it was entirely predictable and completely laudable that the first selectman would seek independent expert guidance before embarking on that course. This is not to say that the chief was wrong in his suggestions or that the police commission was wrong in unanimously endorsing many of those suggestions. It is just to say that as the person ultimately responsible for the town's collective bargaining agreements, I understand fully why the first selectman would want significant due diligence before committing to a very expensive fix, that it would indeed produce a fix, and that nothing short of that would do so. Given that background, it was, in my opinion, very appropriate that the first selectman identified 3 qualified candidates for such a consultant, obtained proposals from them, but then instead of simply selecting one themselves, the Board of Selectmen recommended one of the consultant's proposals to the police commission and asked the police commission to make a final recommendation among the proposals each of the consultants had submitted. The police commission reviewed the proposals submitted, discussed them with the chief, and made a recommendation to the first selectman that a different consultant be engaged than the one identified by the Board of Selectmen. That recommendation was then submitted to and approved by the Board of Finance, submitted to a town referendum, and overwhelmingly approved by the voters. This all strikes me as local government working well together on a notably bipartisan basis. So let's move on from the process and focus on the scope. That is, what the expert consultants are to look at and what they are to do. My starting point here is a recognition that the police commission is not composed of people who are experts on policing. Our most expert individual on policing in town, Chief Sparrow, is by statute not permitted to be on the commission. The commission's job is to provide elected civilian oversight of the OSPD. For the commission to imagine that it is more qualified than the independent experts on policing to instruct those experts as to what they should consider strikes me as a disservice to the people who elected us. The next step then is to ask the question, should the commission work with Chief Sparrow to identify what the experts should be instructed to look at? But if what the town needs is an independent examination of the issue, we need the experts to independently assess how they would do that and not preclude or foreclose them from getting whatever information they think might help them. The ultimate question then, both logically and in order of importance,
is what do the selected consultants actually propose to do? And it is this factor that drove my vote, and I suspect every other commissioner's vote, in favor of the PERF proposal. Because PERF's proposal comes down to talking with the elected officials of the town as to what they expect, talking with present and former members of the OSPD as to their professional expectations and experiences, and making an assessment as to how all those expectations mesh with each other and reality, focusing especially on the issues of recruitment and retention. That is exactly what we need. I agree with Chief Sparrow when he wrote me last week that we now need to let the process, quote, evolve naturally, close quote. The commission has, thanks to the chief's introductions, authorized conditional offers of employment, which will fill our ranks in the patrol division. But we now and still can benefit from independent expertise to assure us that our recent and recurring retention issues can and will be effectively addressed, not just in the upcoming collective bargaining, but also in the organization and operation of our police department. With all that as preface, I'd like to conclude by just expressing my sincere hope that everyone in town government and the OSPD will cooperate enthusiastically and fully with the PERF consultants. PERF is here to help the entire department, help all of us, and we all need to help them do just that. If any other commissioner would like to add to or differ from what I've just said, I invite you to raise your hand now. Let's move on to item 7, commission workshop, the second in command position. We're not having a vote. That's why there's no discussion and action. But I think it is very timely that we promptly address the issue of, we call it broadly second in command. Somebody might think of it as deputy chief. Somebody might think of it as lieutenant or captain. We have no definition of that yet. I have my views as to what we need, but I'd like to begin by asking the chief what his view is. It's really your direct report.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that if you would allow, Mr. Chairman, maybe I could just kind of frame the opening of the discussion. My goal with having this on the agenda this evening is to have one of those really great collaborative discussions. A discussion that does not lead, as you pointed out, to a decision tonight. This is some big picture thinking that I'm going to ask everyone on the commission to do. So we know that when Captain Jeff DePerry sadly left, he left vacant the second in command position. And it is your responsibility as the police commission to determine what rank that position will be, not the job description for it, as the chairman just said. That's up to me to figure out, because he or she would be my direct report. The benefit package that's available to the person taking this position, unless it's just internally and we keep the same package that Captain DePerry had. And try to figure out what we're really actually looking for. What I don't want to do is I don't want to rush a process. I, like you, would like to have a second in command tomorrow. But I don't want the wrong person, and I don't want the wrong or quick thinking decision to impair future planning for department leadership. So it's no shock to anybody here that I'm at the end of my tenure, right? So I have 28 years in law enforcement, 15 years as your police chief. So the question is that when we're looking at this new second in command position, is the commission looking just to find someone to fill the role of second in command? Or are you looking for someone that would be the second in command that may eventually wind up being your next police chief? And I say that because if you are second in command of a police department, but have no desire to ascend to become chief, maybe you're not the right person for that position, because as the second in command, you can become police chief or acting police chief, right, at the moment of a disaster. And so when we put someone in that position, we want to make sure that that individual is ready to quickly ascend and take on the ultimate leadership of the department until the commission's able to convene, do a process, and appoint a permanent person, whether it's that acting person or someone in the future. We also need to think, is this someone that's going to come from inside the agency? Or is this going to come from outside the agency? Do we want to create a scenario where we offer 2 lower level middle management positions, the position of lieutenant, for you to choose 2 individuals out of our sergeants who are interested, that then start an on-the-job interview process, right? New roles, new responsibilities. We watch them. You ask me to give them some executive responsibility with some mentoring and see who rises to the top, and then interview those 2 candidates and choose a new second in command. Do we want to do a survey amongst our personnel and ask them what they would like to see, the qualities and attributes and skill set of a second in command? So these are all the things that I'd like to talk to you about, because I think this is great big picture thinking. I think that every commissioner, the chairman and I talked offline about having this be a subcommittee. I believe very strongly it should involve all of you. The 7 of you should be the committee, because there will be a time where you do have to choose a new police chief, and all 7 of you will be involved in that. So this is a great dry run, learning experience, and understanding of how the process will work. You'll be choosing a new department executive, and I don't want you to take that lightly. This isn't like a new patrolman, not that we take that lightly, but you know, those 15, 20-minute interviews are not what we're looking for a second in command type of position. So I offer those just initial thoughts. I'll have more as the conversation evolves. But those are just kind of my initial thoughts about how you want to frame this, and you know, what are we really looking for?
I'm gonna start a response. I'm not sure I agree that because the position reports to you, the commission has no role in defining the responsibilities. I think we do. I think we're responsible for the whole organization in the department. And of course, what you suggest would receive very serious consideration. I also think that PERF may have some ideas about departmental organization.
If we ask them, but it's not in the scope. So let me just comment to your first comment. The commission couldn't decide that the second in command does the work schedule, for example. That's my decision as the chief of police on what my subordinates do. You wouldn't decide on schedule. You wouldn't decide on responsibilities. I'm not going to call the commission and say, we have a crime scene. Can I put the second in command in charge of it? It's not your role. You're non-operational.
I completely agree with that.
Okay.
So by you saying that,
Mhm.
do you have an outline of what the second in command should do for his would have for qualifications? Is there something we have written up already? Because it's not the first time we've ever had to pick a deputy chief. There must be something somewhere that tells you what you need for qualifications to do that.
So there have only been 2 deputy chiefs of police in the history of the entire police department that started back in 1965. Tom O'Brien and myself. There have only been 2 captains, Jeff DePerry and Tom O'Brien. There have been many lieutenants. And so I think that as we have this discussion, the qualifications will depend on the title we give the position. For example, if we decide to make a deputy chief of police, we may look for someone who's attended the FBI National Academy. But if we're looking to make a lieutenant or captain, that would be a very rare, attainable quality to have in one's career, wherever they are at that level. And so we need to decide, again, big picture, what are we looking for? What are we going to call that person? And then from there, we can start talking about the qualifications. So yes, if you told me you want to make a deputy chief of police, I would have qualifications that I would offer to the commission for consideration. It is completely and ultimately the commission's responsibility to dictate the qualifications of this individual. I can make suggestions. That is totally not my job. You decide degree, college degree, not college, all sorts of things. Command level experience. I'll give you suggestions, totally your call. You appoint this person. I don't appoint. I might make a recommendation, but the appointment, just like new hires, is solely up to this body of 7 people. Once you appoint and they then become my subordinate, then I dictate what their responsibilities are, not their qualifications. Totally different.
Can I chime in for a second? Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I think if I'm understanding what the chief is suggesting is, it is a big picture, and we sort of have to maybe even consider what the chief's responsibilities are right now, maybe get that in black and white, and then from there figure out, he'll figure out the responsibilities for whatever position we decide to, title it. But based on those responsibilities could technically lead to the qualifications in order to complete those responsibilities. So I don't know if that's a step, or, we could figure if that's a possible way to begin.
Let me, Jessica, if I could respond to that, let me kind of turn that around in my response. So depending on what the commission chooses for a title in the big picture, and then what you decide are the qualifications, will cause me to decide what types of roles and responsibilities the person has, right? So if we appoint a lieutenant that has no experience in conducting internal affairs investigations, then that person cannot be put in charge of internal affairs until they've received proper training, got their feet wet, sadly investigated 1 or 2, had their work product massaged, there was some mentoring, et cetera, et cetera. If we're hiring a deputy chief who's coming from another agency, either as a deputy chief or a step down chief, which sometimes happens, or a captain that's rising to deputy chief, but they all have experience with professional standards and doing internal affairs investigations, then they could, within a very short amount of time, be put in charge of internal affairs. So it really the deciding point is big picture. What do you want? What are you looking for? What do you want to call the person? What are you going to require their qualifications to be? And then after your appointment, based on all that, we can decide, what they're going to be assigned. And by the way, that fluctuates. So, my most recent experience with Captain DePerry, his assignments fluctuated based on the needs of the agency. And, that should be the way it is. So as the chief executive officer of the police department, and that person serving as the executive officer as my second in command, they need to complement me. And they also need to be able to be assigned on a moment's notice a completely different task that they're able to handle.
Chief, it strikes me that there's a clear divide. If we are looking to bring someone up internally, that is going to require a considerable training time. If we're bringing somebody in from the outside, hopefully that will be much shorter. And that really focuses attention on the question, what's your timeline? Is your timeline stick with us whichever road we take? Or is your timeline, I get my master's and I'm gone? I'm just to put a hypothetical out. Can you share that with us?
Why in God's name would I negotiate my retirement in open session with the police commission? Never in a million years would I do that, Joe. That makes absolutely no sense. And with all due respect, you should not even ask that in public session. What I'm framing for you is the opportunity to understand the significant responsibility this may be in appointing a second in command position. And so I think that there's some gravity with that. And I'm trying to help the commission frame this conversation in such a way that we are thinking a little bit more big picture, right? So, by contract, all I have to do is give 60 days notice. And you also know I have more than a year of personal leave time in a bank. that either I'm paid out for or I can take. Right? So I can announce tonight that I'm retiring. Maybe that'll be the clip someone uses, but there's more to it. But if I said I'm retiring tonight, I could go on vacation tomorrow for the next 59 days. Now, I love the Department of Police Services. I love the town of Old Saybrook, and I am very, very dedicated to our personnel. And I don't see myself leaving everyone, in a lurch. However, if opportunities come my way, I would be silly for myself and my family not to take them, right?
Just like Captain DePerry.
Just sadly like Captain DePerry. And so I think that the commission has an opportunity to start framing future leadership of the department. To your question about the internal candidates, I think that this commission sends a message, right, wrong, or indifferent, but sends a message in how we handle this. If we say to our personnel, no one is ready for this position, we don't have time to wait, we're just going outside, we might be causing a retention issue, right? So we might have some folks that are like, wow, I just have not yet had the opportunity in my career to either explore a mid-management level position or be able to attend the professional development that I wish I could attend to make me qualified to apply for that type of position. We're sending a message. I'm asking you, big picture, what do you want to do? If you want to stay internal first, try internal first. My recommendation would be, we would reach out to our current sergeants and we would say, hey, anybody here interested in becoming a lieutenant? And the department's done this in the past. So in the past, 4 lieutenants were made. 4. Those 4 lieutenants were given each administrative responsibilities over a specific time period. And then when advancement was going to happen, the commission chose from those 4. So we gave everyone a shot. Cream rises to the top. Appointments made. So that may be a process that you choose to do. Now, if there's a police chief change during that process, well then, so be it. You deal with it then. New chief maybe comes in from the outside, but continues to develop that middle management staff. And hopefully when that individual leaves, maybe our internal folks are ready. That's one option. The other option is come up with qualifications and seek outside. I'm not pointing you in one direction or the other. This is a commission decision, and whatever you do, I will support. But it is a decision you have to make.
I would truly like to just not even, in my mind, I'm not even thinking that the chief is gonna retire soon or wants to retire. That's my mindset. And I would really like the opportunity for him to be here to mentor whoever we bring in or whoever we, is up in ranks. So that's my
I'm sorry.
opinion.
Could anyone,
She wants the chief to, hopes that he stays long enough to either mentor the person that comes from the outside or for somebody to promote from inside.
thank you.
I think that's what that was.
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Can I ask you a question? Ideally, what would you see as the hierarchy?
So if you, but Renee,
And give a
excellent
chance to
question.
write.
Yeah, excellent question, right? But it has a couple different answers. If you're looking for your next police chief, then you're looking for a deputy chief. If you're looking for someone who will stay second in command, when you seek a new police chief, you're looking for a captain. If you're looking to develop from within to maybe either choose your next second in command or your next police chief, you're looking to make 2 or 3 lieutenants.
And then from there, the master sergeant.
Yeah, master sergeant, patrol sergeants, yeah, same hierarchy. Renee, the only thing, if I was a new chief that came to Old Saybrook and I walked in, the only thing that I would say where we're short is we're short middle management. So right now, there's a lot of subcategories of the department that are direct reports to me, and that should not be. So if you look at structure of smaller police departments like Old Saybrook, you'll see that no matter how small, the police chief position is still insulated by a mid-management level. What I've done over the past 14 years, right, wrong, or indifferent, was kind of abolish that middle management level because we were growing as an agency, we had more service demands. So rather than spend our limited budget funds with administrators sitting behind desks, I wanted more boots on the ground, people delivering services. And so that's where I focused.
Work yourself.
Right, correct. And so that's where I focused that. Is it healthy on how it is right now? For me, it is not. And I would not want that for the next leader of the agency.
I got a question for you. So let's say we pick a second command, a deputy chief,
Mhm.
and also we want a captain and a lieutenant,
Mhm.
which means people would have to move up.
Mhm.
Is that possible to do something like that when you were looking for a second command? Just asking your opinion.
Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. But your biggest hurdle, and it seems like the chairman and the first selectman are buds now, which is great. We need him to write the check, because that's a lot in salary, right? That's a lot of money. So, you're not gonna find, we're not gonna make a second in command that's making less than $100,000 a year when we have, right? Because remember, we talked about compression in the budget process, right? So if you take a look at our salary schedule right now, our master sergeant is at 104,520.
Right, didn't we set it for 120 though?
We set it,
it was 140.
yeah, I think we set it for around, I'll tell you right now, we set it for second in command, 115,
Okay.
right? And so in
That's
my
still not
mind,
enough, yeah.
that it's so not enough, because why would I wanna have all that responsibility for $115,000 a year?
Right, $10,000 more.
But it can just be the master and make shift overtime, right? So our sergeants will far surpass the salary that we've allocated for this. Now,
Look at the budget book.
right, but listen, we're in budget season, right? So this is not a popular time to talk about properly compensating people. But to your point, we should be.
Yeah, this is something that is not gonna be a 6-month down the road thing. This is something we're looking at really longer term. And I think that there's a lot of plates in the air being juggled here. Because, yes, part of this whole discussion is certainly going to be, what are you doing?
Mhm.
Not for public session,
Correct.
of course, but it's still going to be in the mix. It has to be. Because I think that will help us determine how we're going to look at the second in command position as we go forward.
So I, just to pause for a second, I would be negligent, you would be negligent if we weren't concerned about succession planning,
Right,
We
right?
need an exit clause or something.
right. We need to have some thought
It's
about
important,
this.
yeah.
Yes, and I have always been a fan of promoting from within as well, so that concept appeals to me. But I don't know that I would promote from within to do the second in command position. Because I think there's still other layers that, need to be had. But even having said that, this is a discussion that we're not gonna solve tonight.
No.
So
And
I think we have to kind of decide how we're gonna move forward as a group with this, whether we set up special meetings, whether we set up subcommittee, whatever we're going to do.
Yeah, and listen, remember, this is a non-union position. So if you wanted to, you could have a conversation with your current leadership team, right? The master sergeant and sergeants, anyone who might be interested in ascending. You can have a non-promotional interview. You just talk with them. You can bring them all in, right? It could be 6, could be 5, could be 2, maybe it's 1. And we could talk about, and I can give you great suggestions for questions. And you spend a half an hour with each one of them. And at the end of that, wasn't a test, wasn't the promotion, but the commission will get a sense on whether or not an internal process is a great idea or an external process. Part of your questioning to your leaders could be, do you feel anyone is ready to be a second in command? Or do you think the department would be better suited with someone from the outside? I just think it's important to get the opinions of the people who are professionally policing your town,
Yeah, that's absolutely.
right?
good.
Because if they're against it all, the person coming from the outside might not be successful. Right, so we need buy-in from everyone, because don't forget, every agency, every business has a culture, right? And when you bring someone from outside into that culture, they may not be able to adapt and be successful. And I want, for succession purposes, no matter who assumes the seat as my successor, I want them to be successful, right? I believe that I've moved the agency significantly further than when Chief Mosca left, and I would want my successor to immediately begin building on my successes and reaching different greatness for the agency. That's the way leadership works. If anyone tells you that any different, They're not a true leader. And so I want to make sure that we're focused on choosing the right people. And again, that comes back to process. We all know I'm a big process guy. And that comes back to process. And that's what we got to kick around the table.
Hey, Chuck, one thing that I think you made very clear to us is that our responsibility is to do the qualifications, and your responsibility is the responsibility. And I think that helps us to get what we gotta get to get this started.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I confess, I need some education from outside counsel as to how much of this has to be public meeting, how much can be executive session. I understand where you're coming from about negotiating. I respect that completely. I am also sensitive to how much opportunity for candor there is in a non-public meeting, not just from the point of view of the general public, but also from the point of view of feelings in the department. So I have reached out, but have not had success yet, getting a little more educated on that front.
So what you may find is that legal counsel will tell you that the commission can establish what's called an employee search committee, and that all 7 commissioners can be part of that committee. And there are different FOI laws related to that meeting. It's kind of like how there's different laws with the collective bargaining process where you can all meet and, it's not a meeting. So I think you'll find that an employee search committee can do everything that you're talking about and it not necessarily be a public meeting. When I was selected to be the police chief in 2009, the police commission did just that. They formed their own employee search committee. It involved all 7 police commissioners, and they had the discussions that we're having now, but they went into a little bit greater detail because they were in that specific format. I do believe, though, the employee search committee's rules are going to be confined to that exact search and not to what we're looking to do. So I think the decision of deputy chief, captain, or lieutenants is going to be public discussion. I think determining qualifications, talking about personalities, things to that effect. I think that's employee search committee. And I think conversations about my tenure would be executive session.
So
That's
this is
the way
like what the Board of Ed just did for the superintendent, basically, right?
I would, that's the law, the way I understand it. But I think that that's the proper way of doing things.
Yeah, okay.
So what prohibits the police officers currently from contacting us and saying, I would be interested in upward movement? Because that's got to kind of be a starting point if we know that anybody's even interested in the department. I just hesitate only because when we have a promote sergeants, it always seemed like a struggle.
Right.
So I'm just wondering how serious some people are about wanting to move up.
Well, I think there's only one way to find out. And that's to ask. And that obviously would come through me. You would tell me, and I don't think we're here tonight, but I think that we would discuss providing an opportunity. I would call it a professional development opportunity for any of our current department leaders who wanted the opportunity to sit down with the police commission to talk about a potential of a non-union promotion. You have to remember that if someone who is currently in the collective bargaining unit that may want to ascend to a lieutenant, captain, or deputy chief position, they leave the bargaining unit to do that. So state statute allows one other person other than myself to be outside of the union. When you leave the union, you leave behind union protection. So the second in command position can be part of a budgetary cut with no union recourse. And so it becomes an at-will position. In Old Saybrook, it's always been at the will of the chief of police and the commission tied together. But the commission could eliminate the second in command position, and there is no roll down. Because that position is outside of the bargaining unit, the bargaining unit doesn't say, yeah, you know what, we'll all take a cut in seniority. Come on back. Won't happen. And so that in itself may prevent someone from wanting to ascend. Let me explain it in a different way. When I became police chief in 2009, if I only lasted 5 years, which is the going rate for police chiefs in Connecticut, I would have left without a pension. Because the only pension that we offer in Old Saybrook is 25 years and out. And so if you choose to look for someone from the outside, a deputy chief, and someday, whenever it is, a chief, you're going to have to also work with the first selectman and the pension committee to have some sort of pension agreement, because if you're a chief somewhere else for 10 years, say I went to another town or another city to be police chief, I'm most likely not going to stay there for 25 years.
Not at this point.
Well, Heather would kill me, first of all, but second of all, I don't think I would last that long. And so you have to, that's part of the package that you offer people, right? And so that's gonna involve more thinking. So in typical Old Saybrook fashion, if you don't want to have that discussion because it's an uncomfortable discussion to have, then your choice is inside. But if I was an inside person, I'd be worried, just as I was, that you could ascend and then be out of a job in 2 years without a pension.
Let me question one thing you just said, because it surprised me. And I think maybe you misspoke.
Okay.
You said by Connecticut law, there's only one position other than chief that doesn't have to be in the union.
Correct.
So you can't have 2 lieutenants?
So in the past, when we had 4 lieutenants, they were out of the union with negotiating with the union. So it's actually one person, not one position. And so if we decided to make multiple lieutenants, we would have to have that conversation with the union. Now, if the commission desired to really focus on this internal professional development opportunity to teach someone to ascend, we could choose to negotiate with the union that instead of master sergeant being the highest rank, lieutenant is the highest rank. But there'd have to be some language in there about it being a salary position and subject to on-call things without extra pay and all that type of stuff. So what I'm presenting to you tonight is a blank canvas. The police commission, right? There's no argument for me, statutorily has some big picture decisions to make. Based on those positions, it'll dictate what path we go down.
So how do we feel like what would be a healthy and realistic timeline?
I think that if you're asking me that question?
Yeah.
So what I would do is, I think we've presented a lot of things to think about tonight. And I think that this commission needs time to think about those things, right? Don't have a quorum, maybe call each other, have a conversation, find a cup of coffee somewhere. And then I think that next meeting, we can have some more discussion, but at that meeting, we should form formally, you should form formally, an employee search commission for the position of whatever you decided to be. But I think you should decide what it is before you do that. In other words, you should come to a decision on, do we want to first explore internal at a lower level? And if that doesn't sit well, then we'll reconvene and make another decision. Or do we just want to go down the path of seeking someone from the outside at a higher level? And I'm not trying to confuse you guys. I want you to know all the different options you have. You have the power to look at our current staff and say, we value you and we apologize that we're so small. Not everyone has had the opportunity for professional growth. We, the commission, want to give you that opportunity now in this framework. Out of the current leaders, who's interested? Now, if no hands go up, well, that's an easy decision, right? If only one hand goes up, well, then you have to decide if that individual is ready, and they may not be just necessarily because they're the only hand raised, right? That would still be subject to a process. And if that doesn't work, then I think we're looking outside. But I think it's all healthy collaborative discussion.
But it's also, in my mind, it's also completely possible, assuming that we can get financial support for it, to have a position of deputy chief from the outside and promotion from within.
Yeah, it's very possible. The salary in your book is nowhere close to a deputy chief salary. It's like just not close.
What is your gut feeling? If you don't want to answer it, just say you don't want to answer it. What is your gut feeling on people thinking that people will want to move up or not wanting to lose a security vehicle?
So I obviously talk to my staff, right? And there are not many people on the staff who want to ascend to the police chief position, only because I think they've watched what I've gone through, right? I mean, sometimes these meetings in themselves are painful and might convince one they don't want to be sitting at the table,
But just
right?
take out the chief position, just upward movement in general.
Well, I think people want upward movement. The question is why, right? So I'm not attracted to people who want to ascend in the agency just so they get a better schedule. That's not a reason to seek promotion. I want people who really want to lead, right? Who have a desire to properly police, to make sure that we're a safe, efficient, fiscally responsible organization. I want someone who knows how to lead or is at least willing to learn how to lead. I need someone with a moral compass that's pointed north, especially in the world of police accountability legislation. And so these are things that are important to me. I would assume they're important to you and part of the discussions that we'll have. So yeah, I think right off the bat, I probably got 3 people that would be very interested in going, oh yeah. But I need to know if it's for the right reasons. And that's why the commission needs to have a heavy hitting, hard interview. Remember, those of you that were on the commission when we promoted the captain, first to lieutenant and then to captain, they went through a full assessment center, a day-long assessment center before they even saw you. I mean, they had executive level projects that they had to complete and hand in that were graded and scored. I mean, this is a no joke thing. This is not come in, where do you want to be in 5 years? I love old Saybrook. It's by the water. You have a canine, like, you know, like the stuff we hear for our entry level patrolmen that you can get off the internet. That is not this. If you want to make it that, you can. I would urge you not to.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, you certainly given us a lot to chew. And I suspect that between now and our next meeting, there are going to be lots of conversations.
Yeah, and every commissioner here is welcome to call me. Yeah, call me. Come in, bring me an iced tea with lemon, unsweetened. Sit down, let's have a conversation. I mean, I think it's healthy. You guys have a big job ahead of you, and it's really important. I mean, I want nothing best than the best for Old Saybrook, the Old Saybrook Police Department, and the men and women who proudly serve day in and day out. You know, after I leave, and this is part of when you choose leadership, either one or two, that really sets the tone, and that's really important to the community. So,
Well, thank you. This was a good conversation.
you're welcome. Mr. Chairman, the next item we do not have to go into executive session on because there has not been a negotiating session.
Okay.
So unless anyone has any questions, we know that 3 commissioners were selected. The first meeting got canceled. The second meeting was scheduled. I don't know if there's any.
Oh, I have a question.
Sure.
Since the meeting was canceled and rescheduled, I'm not able to make that newly rescheduled. Does someone fill in my place, or how does that
I
work?
think best to answer that is secretary.
Yes. The first selectman said that 2 would be sufficient.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I invite a motion to enter into executive session for an employee matter.
And we have none. So you don't have to do that either.
Okay. Do we have any comments from the public? If you do, please raise your hand online. Larry?
No hands raised.
Okay, comments from the chief?
I have none.
Comments from commissioners? Renee?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Jessica?
I just have one quick question, but I mean, I forget if we're even allowed to ask this. In the beginning, you mentioned somebody was put on leave or per leave for a violation. Are we allowed to know the name?
No.
Okay.
They would have to be, and the reason I say no is it's an employee performance
Right.
issue.
Right,
So
right.
they would have to be notified that we were going to discuss them, giving them the opportunity to go to
Okay.
executive.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. Slipped my
Oh,
mind.
that's okay. Great question.
When do they come back? So their 10-day.
The 10 days, it was a 2-week suspension. I think it's on, let's say exactly right now. It would be March 8th at 11 PM.
Okay.
Just so you know, when someone is suspended, real quickly, their law enforcement authority is revoked. All their department of property, including their identification card, their certification card, all badges, all uniforms, everything must be turned into the department.
Gone to.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're still subject to the rules, regulations, policies, and procedures of the department, with the exception of any law enforcement requirements. For example, we have a duty to act no matter where we are, when we are. That duty is removed when you're on suspension because you cannot act in the capacity of a law enforcement officer.
Now, is that suspension with or without pay?
Oh, without pay. Yeah, it's without.
Okay, with that, I invite a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.